Donc, peut-être tout le monde a permis d'édition, mais je vous en prie, n'éditez pas la présentation. C'est pas cool ça. Mais bon, et on change à l'anglais. Maintenant, tout le monde m'écoute bien?
Yeah, so you can also share your screen and then you can see.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so can everyone hear me? I cannot see you, so I will need someone to say yes, no, we, no.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Cool. I also have my mobile next to me with the chat, so I may ask questions. Feel free to reply there if you want to say something. I'll try to keep an eye while we're on this. So thank you very much for the invitation once again. I'm really happy to be participating here. I've been to Toulouse quite a few times. I spent a few Christmas in there in 2000 something, 10, 11, something like that. So it's pretty cool. So as Victor mentioned, I work at Quantsite. We have a couple of colleagues in the call. So Pierre is also around. He's also a colleague besides Victor. I'm Colombian. I'm a civil engineer by trade, and I work with water resources basically, but for the past 5-6 years I moved to working more with software and open source development. And in particularly, I started working with Project Jupyter as part of the core development team in 2020, last year, around July, June, I guess. So I have some experience with our projects in the open source ecosystem. The main language I've been working on for a long time is Python, but working with Jupyter, we need to also work with TypeScript and JavaScript. And if you're later on, I will talk about some of the new projects that we're part of the Quantsite team is working on. And in there, we also have some Rust. Maybe Pierre will want to share a few thoughts when we get there. That would be cool. So I guess the first question is I would like to ask everyone is anyone here has used Jupyter notebooks? And if you have, what are the languages that you have been primarily working with? So please type in the chat and I'll take a look. I see some hands. So, okay, you can also raise your hands, so that also works. So we have Python, PySpark, Scala, Python. Cool. You're my people. A lot of Python. C++, of course. Very important. Okay, cool. So we have a majority of Python users, so that's nice. So have any one of you that has worked in the notebooks has already started working with JupyterLab? So the talk today is about JupyterLab version 3, but JupyterLab has been around a couple of years already. But some people may want to keep using their, let's call it the classic notebook for their workflows because either they're used to or either because you don't know about JupyterLab. So hopefully the talk today will try to explain a little bit what are the advantages. Also we might consider some of the disadvantages of it. For the outline today, I wanted to talk a bit about the background, about where does the whole Jupyter thing come from and what does the project Jupyter entails today. And a second part, we'll talk about Notebook and JupyterLab, a very small comparison on what's one, what's the other, why choose one or the other. What are the new features in this release that we mentioned at the beginning of the call, which is 3.0, which was released a month ago, barely. A little bit of a demo of the interface, the things that you can do In here, we will also see a little bit of the extensions, not only the features that JupyterLab 3, but I want to share maybe some extensions with you. You also may want to share some extensions also with the rest of the community, because this project is not only the software and the official packages that the development team develops, but all the great extensions that other users develop, and sometimes they open source it. Some of them are closed source by companies, but like all these developers and users are a part of this bigger community. On all of the slides, there are usually links on the bottom, sources. They refer to whether I took the information from, or if you want to have additional information on the topic I'm talking about, you're welcome to click there. And finally, a little bit of, if you wanted to write an extension, like what would be the steps that you would need to follow? What are the things that we're currently working on as part of the JupyterLab development? And finally, how can you help and participate more actively in this community? So also, at any point in the presentation, if you have a specific question, please share it. It makes it more interactive if there is someone speaking from time to time besides me. Also, if for some reason the connection goes down, I have no idea if I went down. So from time to time, you can make some noises.
Sure.
Great, thanks. So who's this for? Well, anyone who wants to learn about the ecosystem, notebooks, Jupyter, anyone already using the tools and wants to know what we're working on, anyone looking for pointers on how to develop an extension or where to start looking, and basically anyone that wants to help or participate in the community. So basically it's very open-ended. All questions are welcome here. If for some reason we cannot answer, there are too many questions and we cannot answer all of them, I'll try to tweet some of the answers or do something like that so that everyone can take a look. Yeah, if you're interested in following any of those, yeah, I'm GOA and PECA everywhere. That's basically the two letters of all my names. So I'm missing here Andres. Unnecessary explanation, but there you go. So first, let's go with a little bit of the background on how did we get to the point where we are in 2021. So for those of you who are not familiar with the creator or the person that initiated the whole IPython project, which is the predecessor of Jupyter, is Fernando Perez. He's a Colombian physicist. He did his PhD on, I can't remember what, in Colorado Boulder. And as a side project in 2001, he started working on the first version of what would become IPython. And IPython is basically, for those maybe not super familiar, can you see my terminal?
Yes, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. So this is IPython. Well, this is the latest version of IPython. The initial one probably looked pretty similar, but this number was way lower. And what Fernando wanted was kind of like an interactive console experience, kind of like what you see in MATLAB, where you can have these numbers here for inputs and for outputs, and you can interact with them and do all sort of cool stuff like basic arithmetic. So this was a side project of his, and it started in 2001. By 2014, we went from IPython to Jupyter. I will explain a little bit more after this. And you can get a very detailed timeline of the different events that led from this creation to the moment we're from the IPython website and the news section. Oops. So IPython, well, the first news that you can find in the website is actually for version 0.7.2, but that's actually 5 years later after he started working on this. And it's very similar to what I just showed you. This was like the first attempt to have some interactive Python. That's where the I comes from in the name. After some work that was sponsored, I think, by a company called Enthought, based in Austin, Texas, they started developing a new client, which is like a desktop client. The IPython console works in the terminal, but the Qt console, it's like a desktop application using the Qt framework, which is a graphical user interface creation toolkit. And that way it allows you to have rich text displays. So in this case, you could have pictures, you could have plots, and this is where IPython and Matplotlib started to work together really nicely, because you could plot all these things here and see them right away in your console. So this is already 2011. We're in version 0.11. For 0.12, it became evident that a lot of the moving parts of the console needed to go to the browser. Originally, the idea of the rich console or the rich IPython terminal was to be able to work in the browser, because everything is moving to the browser. Being able to work in the browser takes care of a lot of cross-platform issues that you can avoid, because you don't have to code for Linux or for Mac or for Windows, which is usually the biggest pain. So at this point is when the IPython 0.12 released the notebook, what we now call Jupyter Notebook. At that point was the IPython notebook. And it allowed to intertwine code with text, with images, so that you could create more interactive stories if you were using it for teaching, or to store your workflows if you're using them for research. So how do we come to Jupyter at the end? Well, on IPython 4, which was around 2015, it came like 3 years or more of work trying to split all the different components in IPython, because we say IPython and we think of one package, but the whole infrastructure of dependencies and packages are enormous. So maybe you have heard of packages like IPyKernel, IPyClient, kernel managers, MB format, MBDime. There are a lot of things going on. So this effort when IPython 4 arrived was to split the things that made sense, that they became language agnostic, so that you could generalize the workflow of IPython to other kernels, so that you can start using Spark, that was mentioned, R, Lua, and many others. So at this moment, the project became Project Jupyter, which is a portmanteau for Julia, Python, and R, which at that moment were like very important languages. Well, they still are, but was kind of like where the name came from. And from there, well, the project started with Fernando, but a lot of years has passed, 20 years basically, since the inception of IPython. And a lot of contributors, a lot of people working with subcommittees, trying to work with companies, open source developer doing this on their free time, postdoctoral researchers. If you will see, a lot of the people that are working on this project in the past are PhD students, postdocs, and so on. So this is kind of like where we landed, and how IPython became Jupyter, and how Jupyter became much more things than just an interactive console or a notebook. This is a very brief story on this introduction on Jupyter. If you have any further comments, I may have said something incorrect, so if you know more, you're welcome to share this. If not, anyone saying yes will let me know that I'm still on the call.
Yes.
Really interesting. Thank you.
So now let's talk a little bit about Project Jupyter itself, and now what it includes, what it entails. So the ecosystem itself has like a motto. This is from the website, like exists to develop open source software, open standards, and services for interactive computing across dozens of programming languages. This wouldn't have been possible if the massive work of splitting IPython into the things that were Python specific and language agnostic, if that work hasn't been carried out, this would not have been possible. And it was a major undertaking at that moment. What are the projects or the main projects that include the Jupyter ecosystem? Well, you have the Jupyter Notebook, which is a classical thing that I guess a lot of people are still using out there, and maybe some of you are still using, because it just does the good work. It just works, I guess. So you get a file browser, then you click on your notebook, and you have something like what you see on the right. Now, JupyterLab, which will be the focus of the next chapters, well, it's very similar in the notebook in the original sense, but JupyterLab, like its name indicates, is more like a laboratory for you to explore with different things. So you don't only have one notebook in one browser tab, but you can actually have many different things side by side. So you can have an editor, you can have a notebook, you can have a launcher, you can have plots, and you can interact with the different components of this interface in a single tab of your browser. This has pros and cons in terms of performance, in terms of efficiency, in terms of how fast can you do things or how well can you concentrate. And it's very extensible, and it was created with this in mind. And it's very modular. So JupyterLab is basically a set of, I guess at this point, over 50 different components or plugins or extensions, depending on the name you want to use, that just work together like kind of like a Lego system. So some things might not be there, so you cannot use them, but you might create an extension and then connect to the file browser or to your notebook and do things when events are triggered. So it's very loosely coupled, and it allows to really expand the experience of what you are doing depending on your workflow, because not everyone's workflows is the same. If we're doing data cleaning, if we're doing data organization, if we're doing machine learning, if we're creating a dashboard, if we're creating a presentation. So many different things require a different structure, and this is what JupyterLab is aiming to provide. These building blocks so that you can go crazy and be productive and create very awesome stuff. Another project that is very important, but usually when we are working as a single user on our computer, is Jupyter Hub, which is basically a big Lego piece that you put on top of either Jupyter or Notebook that allows you to have authentication, centralized deployments, use containers, Docker, and friends, and have a single place where you can have your data stored and your code so that it doesn't have to live in your computer, it lives on the server where Jupyter Hub is hosted. This is very useful and has been deployed successfully on many companies, classrooms, and research labs. So if you are looking for an environment, in a collaborative environment where you can start playing around with these tools, I'll recommend you take a look at Jupyter Hub. There is also Voila. So the name already gives you an idea of where the people that created this come from, but I'll let you take a guess. So a lot of this work by Voila was created by a company called QuantStack, which is based in France and other countries in Europe. And it helps you, once you have your project, your research notes, the things that you want to share, maybe you want to share it not in a way that people need to run things, but you just want to share maybe interactive plots or some results, then you can create a dashboard using Voila and get something like what you see on the right. You can get some charts where you can get some widgets that you can move, and the charts will update according to the widgets. For those who have used IPython widgets, you're probably familiar with these tools. So let's say that these are the basic building blocks of the Jupyter ecosystem, but the ecosystem is actually made of hundreds of packages. If you look at different organizations, so we have the organization for Project Jupyter, which hosts around 75 repositories. Not all of them are packages, but a big chunk are. Same for JupyterLab, we have 52 different repositories. For Jupyter Server, we have 5 repositories. This is a new organization that was created specifically for the release of JupyterLab 3.0. There is also Jupyter Hub here and all other bunch of organizations all under the Jupyter ecosystem that keep creating packages that all of the ecosystem needs and all of the ecosystem profits, which also leads to a problem that we'll discuss later on, is that we are in need of people that want to help maintain a lot of these packages. A lot of people that started developing these packages and maintaining them, well, they either got tired or they don't have any more time, or they have a life where they just don't want to spend more time on this, which is completely okay, but we really need the help of people helping maintain this ecosystem. So more on that at the end. Also, if you do a quick search on PyPI, the Python package index for Jupyter or JupyterLab, you will see a bunch of projects. Not all of these are related to the core development team. A lot of these are just extensions that people have created throughout the years, or tooling that would enhance your experience. And there are a lot of other partner projects that may not be completely under the organization of Jupyter, but are related. So one of these is just Jupyter Book that I wanted to share with you. Oops, wrong link. And it's basically a way where you can create publication quality books from your notebooks, and also using Markdown and not having to learn something like restructured text, which is very powerful, but can be verbose and sometimes a bit annoying. So if you haven't checked this project yet, please do and take a look. It's a very, very nice part of this project, resulting in the MIST parser, which is a Markdown language with some extensions that made it completely compatible with REST, so that you can have directives for single lines or for blocks. Anyone has used Sphinx or restructured text or know what inline directives or block directives are? Raise your hand. No? Sphinx?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Cool. So for those of you who are not familiar with traditional documentation in the Python world, has been written in restructured text, but Markdown is just simpler and it's easier. The way GitHub proves that everything is in Markdown in there. So this was a very cool project that developed that, let's say, that Markdown parser that is really powerful. So no need to write your documentation anymore in restructured tests. Now for the second part, we will go more in depth into the notebook and the Jupyter and JupyterLab. And well, a lot of questions, or the main question that one hears that people ask is like, why do I move there? Like, I'm happy with the notebook, or well, which one should I choose? And the answer is, well, until some time ago, it was like, it depends. Just do what you want to do, and if you like one, choose the other. This answer, moving forward, is not going to be the same, because the notebook is, or at least the classic notebook, is going to be deprecated. So at some point in time, the notebook is not receiving much maintenance besides the minimal work or critical fixes, bug fixes. So staying in the notebook at some point will become a security problem, because you're not getting the latest updates. Now, for when people are starting to use it, using JupyterLab, the first thing they say is like, I like the notebook, I don't know if I need this complex layout where I can move things and I have several windows inside a single browser tab. Another thing that comes very often is like, what about my extensions? I had a bunch of really cool extensions that work in the notebook, and I cannot find them in JupyterLab. And there are reasons for this. Notebook and JupyterLab are not compatible. The way they are built are different. So things that you build for the notebook, unless it pertains the backend part of it, will not be compatible with JupyterLab. So a lot of the lag that has been there in terms of adoption of JupyterLab has been that a lot of the extension have been slowly being ported to JupyterLab so that the question to the right is no longer an issue in the months or the years to come. But still, JupyterLab developers have worked hard to try to provide a way for users that are used to a more streamlined interface or simpler interface to have something that is relatively similar to it. So in the screenshot here, we have JupyterLab with the simple interface mode activated. On the demo, we'll talk a little bit more about it, but it basically allows you to have the same single document working experience, and you can open or close the things like the file browser or the debugger, but basically you can still keep that single notebook look or single document look, which a lot of people were really asking for. Wrong URL. Okay, sorry for that. And then there is another project that spun out from also the guys at OneStack a few months ago. I think it was Jeremy Tulip who did most of the heavy lifting for this. And it's something that looks very, very similar to the notebook, the classic notebook that we used to use and love. But this one was built with all the new components from JupyterLab. So having this Lego toolkit where you can take the pieces you need allowed him to create somehow kind of like a replica of the Jupyter notebook look and feel. But this is already using all the infrastructure for JupyterLab. That means that all the extensions that work with JupyterLab will work here. And that also means that you will be able to write extensions that work either here on JupyterLab Classic, which is a different project that you can install, or JupyterLab, the normal one. So this is like an alternative version. It was released relatively a few months ago, I guess. So if you just want to give it a try, just visit the link on the bottom, install it and run it, and let us know how it went. So this is like an outside project in terms of it's not being currently, let's say, maintained or developed by the core developers, but it's being maintained by QuadStack guys. So it's a pretty interesting alternative for people that want to make the switch without getting a very disruptive interface change. So okay, finally we're to the meat of the actual talk, when it's like, what are the things or what are the new features that we shipped for you on JupyterLab 3.0? And a lot of people that are already not familiar with JupyterLab will already say like, whoa, 3.0, that feels like a high number, and it is a high number, and it's partly because a lot of the extensions that do not work with the notebook and haven't been ported is something that prevents a lot of users from actually moving. So I don't know if up to here there are any questions or things that are not clear or whatever comments you want to share. If no, I'll take a sip of water before continuing. Still here with me?
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, so go ahead with the meat of the of the presentation.
The meat. Okay, so this is going to be very, very quick. I'll try to go more calmly and in depth when we are doing the demo, so that I can open JupyterLab and show you the things in place. But one of the things that were available as an extension in JupyterLab 2, but now it's part of core in JupyterLab 3, is a debugger. So for many of you that have worked with more traditional integrated development environments, a debugger is a very essential part when you're trying to find why your code doesn't work, which happens a lot when you're programming. So I'll go with some examples in a minute, but basically the debugger adds a panel where you can see the different things that you have defined in your current context or stack of the code that you're executing. It also puts some lines on the cells so that you know where you are. You can put breakpoints, as most editors allow you to do, and then you can run things step by step. There is a caveat regarding the debugger, is that the debugger is based on a protocol that was created by Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken, which is the debugger something protocol. And not all the kernels have implemented a way of using this protocol. So to be able to test the debugger, you will need to install the Python kernel that is provided by SUSE. I'll give you a little more context into that in a minute. Most of this information regarding the summary of the things that were released for this version are available in the blog post in the bottom. So you can also take a look and save that for later. Some things are not included in this presentation because they might be too extension authoring oriented. The second thing that was before available as an extension, but now it's available as a core part of JupyterLab, is the table of contents, which allows you to structure your document using headings of different nesting and being able to navigate this in a way that is more intuitive and clear. If you want to go to a specific part of your document and your notebook is just getting too large, which is something that happens quite often, using the table of contents allows you to quickly go to different sections of this document. This is another part that is very important for reaching out different communities. So is the availability of localization and internationalization of the JupyterLab project. This was part of the big chunk of work that I did last year, and somehow this was what gave me my wings to be able to enter the project. It was a very interesting project. I had some experience in previous packages. I had also worked trying to enable localization. And right now we have a lot of languages that we can provide the language packs for, but we haven't released them yet. We want to have like a big release in a couple of weeks for all the languages that are available. This was a proof of concept so that I could show you how it would look for Chinese or simplified Chinese. You will be able to install language packs for different languages. All the work of translating the strings has been carried out by volunteers all around the world. And this is also an invitation for all of you, if you want to see JupyterLab in your favorite language, be it French or not, to help translate it and in the process bring these tools to a wider community. There were some improvements in the simple interface mode that was already available in version 2. I'll show you that in a minute. Finally, something that might have affected some of you if you were already using this package is that the installation of extensions before JupyterLab 3 was a bit of a pain, because you also needed to have Node.js, because when you were installing an extension you needed to compile some of the sources and create a bundle, and that way JupyterLab could be started with your new extension. And that process was slow. It required you to have this extra dependency in your system, and it just made things annoying. And starting with JupyterLab 3, all the extensions are now loaded dynamically in the front-end side of things, well, JavaScript. And this was achieved by using something called, I believe, federated extensions. That is what Webpack provides. Webpack is a package that will gather all your assets and sources, JavaScript for the front end, CSS, JSON files, and whatever you need, and will compile them from TypeScript to JavaScript, put them in the right location, and allow them to work together seamlessly. So now it is possible to just pip install an extension and refresh your window in JupyterLab, and you should be good to go. So the process has become really fast. If you're using Binder for sharing your work with colleagues, friends, and users, also if you only use pip now, it will be much faster to load a Binder. So does anyone not know what Binder is or has not used it? I may need to give some more context in there.
Well, maybe you can just share what it is and probably it will be okay.
No, I want them to participate.
All right.
Okay, so let's go.
I always hand the questions or remnants from the last poll.
Sorry?
I don't know, François, Bertrand, Jean-Pierre, did you have any question or did you forgot to unraise the hand?
Maybe they were left raised from the previous.
No question from my part.
Yeah, I think so.
So, can you still see my screen?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. What happened here? Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So Binder is a service that allows you to take a repository from GitHub that contains some notebooks and some files to tell it what to do regarding dependencies, so that you can actually open that repository and get a server running, and it will install your dependencies, and you can play with this right on your browser without having to install anything locally. So a lot of the Jupyter related projects, you will find a batch called Launch Binder. That will start Binder and will show you some process regarding the things that it needs to do. If it already built an image before, it will be faster. If it's the first time it does it, it will take some time. But it will basically just allow you to play with the latest version of JupyterLab, in this case, the demo, right there in the browser. You see that it has some extensions prepared for you, C++ kernels, the SUSE Python kernels, which is different from the standard Python kernels, and this is the one we need to be able to use the debugger. So this is a very powerful service that is also like part of the whole Jupyter ecosystem that allows you to share easily some works on notebooks, so people can just open them without having to install things. So this is very powerful, very used. Some of you may have used Google Colab, which is like a Google thing that kind of provides something like that with all the Google security and all the Google integrations. But if you're more on the open source side of things, probably I would nudge you to use my Binder, which is an open source project, and all the machines that run all these projects are, I think, are donated by, I don't know who's donating the CPU power for this, but it's a project that is open source, so I'll encourage you to use it.
It's like a GKE there. So Google Kubernetes thing, no?
Yep. Maybe it's Google, maybe it was Rackspace, maybe it was something. I can't remember now. I think it has changed over the years.
Okay.
So a little bit of, I was talking a lot about Webpack and Node.js and a lot of things, and it might help just to have a little overview of how JupyterLab is built. There are basically two components. The front end is basically TypeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript that includes typing. And by doing this, it really allows you to work with JavaScript in a way that you can maintain a really big project, because being able to provide types allows the type inference system of TypeScript to allow you to go to a given location, to go where classes are defined, to find information on the methods, to allow you, to give you information if you are doing something wrong because you're giving the wrong type argument to some method or function. This is then compiled to JavaScript, well, vanilla JavaScript. That's the whole point of TypeScript, is like let you work in a productive environment where you can really have a huge project and still be able to work. But at the end of the day, you just compile that to vanilla JavaScript that will run in your browser, in any browser. And on the other side, you have a server, which is mostly Python. When you're running JupyterLab on your local machine, you're running the server and you're seeing the things that your own computer is serving. Where you're using an external service or Jupyter Hub, well, that server is running in Python, wherever the server is located. So when you're writing some extension, you might need to do both things. If you're doing something that just provides a kernel for a new language, or that's something in the backend, maybe you can just go with your life with Python, which most of the people in this chat are using. But if you need to go the next step and create a new widget, a new panel with buttons that do stuff, you will need to work in TypeScript. And for those coming from Python, it's not so difficult to make the transition. There are some idiosyncrasies that each language has. But if you're already familiar with Python, then working with TypeScript is relatively easy. So enough talking and sliding, and let's move a little bit more into a bit of the demo of the features in actual JupyterLab. So let's go there. So I already had something running, I think, but I may not. I may have closed it or not. Let's see. Oh, come on. There we go. So when you start JupyterLab, different from when you start the notebook, let's start the notebook so that we can see them side by side. So when you start the notebook or the classical notebook, you just get like a file system on the place where you launch it from, and you can select something and try to run it, and it will open a new window, well, a new browser tab, and there you have the usual notebook that you're used to. When you're opening JupyterLab, well, you get a file browser right away on the left that you can collapse, and you get a launcher that tells you, okay, you can start some notebooks, you can start some consoles, or you can start some other things. So let's go to the debugger, which is the first feature that I was mentioning. So as I said before, to be able to use the debugger, you need to use a kernel that is compatible with the debugger. In this case, the SUS kernel. You will see the XPython in there. And when you have that kernel, you will be able to enable debugging. This will open this the right stack to the right and allow you to start debugging your code. So first to debug, we need to put some breakpoints. So let's put some breakpoints here. This is a very simple code, not doing anything interesting, but good enough for demonstrations. Every time you create a breakpoint, you will be able to see them here, and you can start running the code and a step on each of the breakpoints like you probably have used on other IDEs. So on the bottom, you see the source of the code that is being executed. You see the call stack. You see the variables that have been defined on every moment of your code. So at this point, we have A equals 1. If we go an extra step, we will find out that we have B that was executed here, and that we have entered the loop, and we have defined I to be 1. So this allows you to see global variable, local variables, and step by step on your code, and see like every step of the way what you're doing. So this is a very powerful tool to find problems and issues with whatever you were trying to do. But it does come with this extra dependency, the SUS Python. So these are kernels that are based on SUS, which is a C++ implementations of the kernels instead of a Python one. So you can install them using something like this. You can install SUS Python either, and that should be enough to get you there.
There is a question asking that in point 3.0, so this okay.
So yeah, so this was actually a point of debate during the release of Tree. Is like, we provide the debugger, but to use the debugger, you need to install an extra package, and it's kind of like the best. It was the decision that was the best of the worlds. We want the debugger to be more developed, more used, and we want people to be able to provide more kernels that are compatible with the debugger. But at the same time, we didn't want to confuse users by providing the standard Python plus another Python kernel. So it's a bit confusing if you're just starting using it, but if you are feeling adventurous, just install it and just start your notebook with that kernel, and you get debugging for free. So the other thing that we mentioned, yes?
There's another question. I think also yes, the answer there.
So a different kernel doesn't necessarily mean a different Python. So the kernel is the thing that will communicate and handle things that you send to it and things that it will return, but it is not tied to Python itself. So to the question, does it mean that no, you don't have to install. They are still living in the same. If you notice here, you will see that this is relative to the Python that you have installed. So in my environment, I have a Python 3.9 installed, and that's where I installed SUSE. And these other Python versions are all of the other Python environments that were found in my computer. But since I'm working with all different type of environments, that's why it finds all of those. But this Python 3 here, it's also a Python 3.9. It's just that we're starting with a different kernel, to a different, let's say, communication handler manager. Does that answer the question? Cool. So the other thing to take into account is that because this kernel, let's say that there are compatibility in terms of like, the IPython traditional kernel provides a lot of magics and allow people to do a lot of monkey patching. SUSE Python, because it's written in C++, it has some limitations in terms of what are the things that it can provide that currently the IPython kernel provides. So the normal IPython doesn't implement debugging. SUSE Python does, but SUSE Python doesn't implement a lot of the IPython magics that a lot of people are nowadays used to. So they're trying to slowly reach parity in terms of features, but let's say that you can switch easily between one and the other depending on the things that you need to do. So you can if you just need your magics, just go for your normal Python kernel. But at that point, you see that the toggle disappears, so you can no longer start debugging. If I go back to my SUSE Python kernel, I should see the toggle appear. So yeah. Another question. Good question, Francois. I think it does. It does. It does. That's actually one of the problems that the normal IPython sample. Oh, I'll get back to you on that with a link. One of the issues that IPython kernel has with moving to the debugger is precisely how it can handle threads and how it can, the channel that it needs to communicate things that you're debugging versus the things that you're running. So that's one of the problems. I'll get back to you with some demos of it, but I will not do that right now because there are still a lot of things to show, and I will probably do something bad in the process. What else? So yeah, the table of contents, that's a cool one. The table of contents lives in the left side. You can write some code, some cell blocks that are marked down, and you can see the level that they have. Well, the table of contents just allows you to quickly go to that section. For this example, it's not very useful, but for sure, if you have a very big document, this is very, very useful. Some things that you can also do when you're working with code cells is that you can collapse them. Maybe You were not aware of that, but something that is nice and you can do. You can also move cells. This is probably something that some of you already were using, but it's worth mentioning. You can also collapse the outputs if you click on the blue line to the left. So this is not part of core, and you can change the view if you want to have dots or not. So this is very useful, especially for people that are working on material that are using in lessons. I have used this on some lessons of courses that I have taught in the past on a statistic, and it's very, very, very useful. One of the other things that was implemented, and we already mentioned a bit, is that there were some improvements in the simple mode. You can either toggle it by going to View and Simple Interface, or now there is a toggle on the bottom that you can directly check. And now you have more of a traditional interface in terms of simplicity. You don't have docs, you don't have layouts. You can concentrate on your work. This can be kind of like a Zen mode. If you're working in JupyterLab and you don't want distractions, this could be one way of seeing it. But now that we have seen this, it's probably important to see that you can open many different things and you can organize them. Like if you wanted a more traditional MATLAB-y look, you could have something like this, where you have the terminal on the bottom, you have your notebooks on the top. Maybe you also have some text files where you are writing text. You can also have some things like you could create a new Markdown document, and you can have them side by side. No, not that one. And you can open them with the Markdown preview, so you could do something like, you could write something here like level 1, and on save you could start seeing the things in real-time preview. So you can, if you're working on Markdown documents, one of the things that you can do is have this, like a native view and a preview view, and you can apply this to any type of document that you are creating by creating different extensions. There's a question here. Any one-click magic cheat sheet showing the interface? What do you mean? Sorry, I don't follow you, Francois.
He actually probably asking if there is sort of demo which just on the interface can show you all those magic things, probably. Or okay.
So there was kind of like.
Oh no, actually, I think it's something else he asking. Like, okay, MATLAB, yeah, all those. Probably this is also supported. This is not deprecated.
Okay, I'll look in a bit. Okay. What else? What else? Okay, so close this. Let's see what we have here. We have the simple extension displays. Okay, displays. So also, once you install the packages for the language packs, which at this point we don't have anything available publicly on PyPI. It would be something like this. You can open the terminal right away in actually. Let me. So in theory, you would go and do something like JupyterLab language pack, and you would find them there. There are none. But to install one, it would be something like, so that you know when they come out relatively soonish. You could do something like this. If you install JupyterLab, you would refresh your interface, and then on the settings in language, you will see something appearing on the menu. And that will allow you to work on that. Because a lot of the extensions are now also pip installable without requiring a build, you can actually, what was the name of that? So let me, no. Let me show you an example here. Where's this? Yeah, I don't have this here. Sorry. Live demos. So this regards in terms of the. So sorry, I'm not doing a more elaborate demo on how to actually use the notebooks or how to do something, let's say, more interesting. But that would be a completely different talk in terms of using JupyterLab, which I can point you to some videos that were made for JupyterCon, which took place last year virtually, and there are a lot of tutorials there to in-depth for every single one of these features and in general for the usage of JupyterLab and notebooks inside JupyterLab. Let's go back a bit to the third part of the talk, and is JupyterLab extensions. So the big thing about JupyterLab is being able to work with these Legos, and there are a lot of different extensions out there that will make your life easy. We have seen that we need to either do TypeScript or Python or both, depending on the thing that you will need to do. But there is a lot of very good documentation and a very good repository, links on the bottom, where we take you by the hand and in how to write your first JupyterLab extensions. Or you can visit the repository, which is the image on the left, where we have different examples that you can say, I want to work with the command palette. What's the command palette? So the command palette, oh, come on. If you want to do something with the command palette, you would go, where's the command palette here? I think there is an issue here.
It showed you that you could activate it, no? Or in view or something, somewhere there.
Oh, yeah, I remember. I forgot. Yeah, absolutely. So the thing with the command palette in this version is that it went from being on the left to be something that you can have like a pop-up, which a lot of interfaces use today. So I was really used to the one on the left, but you can do Command-Shift-C and you will get your command palette. And in here, basically, when you write a plugin, you can write commands that are either displayed on menus or on the command palette or on both. Or they can be actions that are a button, but you can display them also in the command palette. So if I want to have, I don't know, if I want to save the document, I could do it from the command palette by selecting that and clicking save. So the command palette is one of the plugins that you have in JupyterLab that you can extend and add things to it. Like maybe your plugin doesn't show a widget, but it will create a couple of commands that you will see on the command palette. And that will require very little knowledge of TypeScript. So you can work with signals. This is when an event happens. If you open a notebook, a signal is emitted. If you close a notebook, a signal is emitted. If you open a kernel, if you shut down the kernel, every time you take an action, you will emit a signal. And this is how things communicate in JupyterLab. You can create commands, add them to the command palette. You can create things and add them to the launcher. So remember when we were looking at the SUS kernel, or when we were creating a new terminal, if we go to the launcher, you will see a bunch of icons that are grouped, like notebook related, console related, other. So you could create an extension that will create a new thing here that you can open and you can work with. And I'll show you an example of that one in a second. So if you want to learn more about extensions or how to start playing around with things, there are many roads. You can either start looking at the actual code base of JupyterLab and see how things are done. You can see how other extensions are doing what they're doing. Or you can come to the extension examples and the extension developer guide and follow the steps one by one. Now, one of the big issues that we were talking before in terms of going from the classical notebook to JupyterLab, but also from going from JupyterLab 2 to JupyterLab 3, is that there were changes needed so that you can make your extension work. The core developer team tried to make their best effort to create some tooling so that you could automatically run a script and change your extension to work with the new format. But still, you needed to do some hand tweaks if you were developing something for the backend as well and not only the front end. So there is this issue here that compiles, not that one, not that one. Okay, let's go there. So you can go to this issue, and this is a list of all the extensions that are currently compatible with some information. IPyWidgets, PyCar, Plotly, all the different things that you need to know of. Are they compatible with 3.0? And what is the version that started offering this compatibility? This is also a nice overview of different extensions out there that are doing things that might interest you. So I invite you to take a look at many of these different links. I'll show you a couple in a minute so we can take a look at some cool extensions that you can work with. So what are the things that are currently being done by the team? And this is more like a bulletin update news somehow of the things that we are working. And some of the things that I have personally been working with some clients through QuantSight is improve the performance of JupyterLab in general in terms of what happens when you open a notebook that has a lot of cells or a lot of outputs or a lot of nodes. So for small example toy notebooks that I've been playing today, there is no appreciable problems there. But when you start going over hundreds of cells or outputs, the notebook is taking a while to load. So there are different strategies that we have been doing for the past year in improving the performance so that problems that are hitting some of our clients may not hit users out there in the wild. So this includes testing in continuous infrastructure. What happens when we open a notebook that we create with 100 outputs on each div or one output with 100 divs? We're testing for Chromium and Firefox versions, and we're checking how things are improving with our changes. If you want to know more about this work, you can visit the links on the bottom. There is real-time collaboration. This is a project, a thing that has been around the JupyterLab ecosystem for quite some time. There is some history in there in terms, initially JupyterLab used some service that Google provided to handle all the real-time collaboration, but one day Google decided to shut down that service, and basically the Jupyter team had to start from scratch. Part of this Jupyter real-time collaboration effort right now is part of a grant from CCI, the Schenck Zuckerberg Initiative. And actually we have in the call one of the lead developers that are working on real-time collaboration. So I don't know, I don't have much to say right now. It's something that I want to share, but Pierre, if you want to share something regarding this work, I will be more than happy to give you some time.
Yeah, thank you, Gonzalo. It was not planned that I talk tonight, but I am very glad to. So greetings, everyone. Greetings from Strasbourg, the other side of France and the other city of Saucis. after Toulouse. Yes, I am working with Consite on doing the real-time collaboration features on JupyterLab. We rely on what we call CRDTs, which are, I forgot actually the exact name, but it's data structures that can be, it's cross-replicated data structures. Yeah, it's data structures that can be duplicated and edited by different clients, different users, and synced together, but without having to exchange all the messages all the time. It has it implies mechanism of conflict resolution, and so we have as a goal. We have the goal of having like the Google Doc experience with all the users, and you see the cursor of your colleague, and you can add comments and so on. So we are trying to make this experience inside JupyterLab.
So this is an extension, right?
It will be a JupyterLab extension. Yeah.
Okay.
Right
Yes,
now,
now
it's a proof of concept.
Yeah. So we are further than the proof of concept. We are on. So it's still work in progress, of course. On the technical stack, we are relying on some Rust implementation of the CRDT. And regarding the question of François, I suggest you. it's easier if you read the papers around CRDT. I myself haven't read them. I am a consumer of CRDT implementations. I am a consumer. I'm not a writer of any kind of the mechanics inside the CRDT. I'm just a user regarding this. But this is very interesting. From what I have learned so far about this, it's very interesting concept. So that's it. I think it's yeah.
I think we have some of these articles available if you go to the RTC website. I think that we have documentation in there in terms of this background. I think, maybe.
Yes, for sure. And CRDT are very known. I mean, there are papers and many blog posts about what are CRDT, and I'm sure that all the people here who are into algorithmics will find it very interesting.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Pierre, for that.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Attachment. So yes, as Pierre said, this is a very exciting thing that will eventually allow us to have the Google Docs experience. So making comments, chat, writing a thing at the same time, and it's for sure going to be very powerful, and we are getting very close to something that will be available for the users. So awesome work. Another one of the initiatives that is very important but sometimes neglected in open source, because we just sometimes don't have enough resources or people interested in different topics to work on this, and it's accessibility. And how can we make the actual usage of JupyterLab with readers or with different contrast, or people that have impairments either in vision or in hearing? How can we provide the right interface and the right abstractions so that they can use this without issues? Because to be honest, right now there are a lot of problems with using JupyterLab with screen readers because of the way HTML needs to be written, because of the way JavaScript needs to work for the different sections of a page. If it's a header, if it's a site area, if it's a footer, if it's a new section within. So how can you use JupyterLab and notebooks, let's say, if you don't have a mouse? Like, is there a way to really navigate through all the different things in the interface in a way that feels natural and doesn't hinder your ability to do work? So this is something that has started in years past. Some studies have been made, some evaluations have been made, but only until recently we started like more formally having a work group that is meeting every 2 weeks, defining some goals, and actually making pull requests so that we can adapt the code base, not only in JupyterLab, but some of the foundations that it uses to be able to work properly in different circumstances. So this is a very interesting project. If you also want to know more about this, I invite you to the Jupyter accessibility link. There is a lot of information there. The meetings are open to the public, so if you want to learn about this or just attend and hear or provide concerns, features, requests, you're more than welcome. Part of releasing any software is actually working on the next version. So we already started to think, what is JupyterLab 4 going to be and what are the things that we're going to make? There are a couple of issues down there at the bottom that you can visit. You can start giving opinions on something that you think that should be in the next version that you cannot live without and that the core dev probably should prioritize. Well, this is your opportunity to do it. So I invite you to also go there and say what you think about JupyterLab, how would you like it so far, and how would you like it to improve. So we're arriving at the end almost of this presentation for today. I was trying to give a really big overview of the ecosystem and a little bit more in detail in JupyterLab and the new things that it has. It did not go in depth in actually using JupyterLab for the things that were not new for 3.0, so I apologize for that, but we can schedule a different session for that. So at the beginning, I told you that this is a community effort. It's backed by many companies. It's backed by many developers that either are paid or are working on their free time. And to be able to sustain this community, we need your help. Basically, we need the help of users, developers, researchers, data scientists. Anyone using the tools can help in their own little way, and this is just a small snapshot of what you can do to help. So first thing first, you can file bugs or request features in the GitHub issue tracker. Right now we have over 1,800 issues that have been on the backlog, and that number just keeps increasing. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but the more things that you request or suggest, the more things that we can do about it, and maybe also in the process you can get interested in also contributing to the code base. Localizations, so I'm giving a shout out to myself on this one because this was part of the work I did. So if you want to help with translations, you can go to Crowdin, which is the localization platform where we are crowdsourcing all the translation efforts. We have, this is a very old picture, I guess, but we already have Spanish, French, German, Chinese simplified, and actually, let's go there. So yeah, we have a bunch. We have Ukrainian, we have Turkish, almost there, Russian, Romanian is there, Brazilian is there, Japanese is there. French is there, but bear in mind that this only refers to the core of JupyterLab, but then there is also the issue of how do I deal with extensions? Well, you can also help, and that is another one of the things that you can do. So if you can start translating, you just go to Crowdin, pick a language, and start just doing things. The interface is pretty nice. You get some strings on the left that need translations. You get some suggestions. You get to put your actual translation, and you have a chat where you can ask questions if something is not clear. This effort is crowdsourced. We also have some glossaries that we have there to help define some common use terms like Git or GNU public license, or should I translate this or not? And sometimes these things are language related. Some languages will translate everything. I don't know, like French. I don't know, kernel, do you say noyau or do you say kernel?
Maybe both.
So what's more usual? Like everyone understands in the tech when you're speaking in technology that noyau means in this case to a kernel providing something, or I don't know. This changes in every country. So we also have some glossaries, and we need you to help us define that because we don't know those rules because we only speak a couple of languages, and maybe some of them are not our native languages. You can help localize your favorite extension. You can pick an extension, follow the documentation on the bottom, see code examples. You can also help us improve the actual documentation of JupyterLab and tutorials. You can helping in open source doesn't mean coding. You can write issues. Writing an issue is already helping a lot. Improving documentation is already helping a lot. If you would like to see documentation in a different language, that's something that is currently not there, but if enough people are interested in this, we'll try to set up the infrastructure so that it's easy for contributors to help us do this. You can participate. You can go to the Discourse channel, or you can go to the Gitter channel, which is a chat, basically. In there you can hear about the more recent things. If you have questions, if you have problems, and you don't want to open an issue, or maybe you know someone in the chat and you want to talk to them in particular, that's another way of doing it, and it's more live chatting than just asynchronous messaging. You can also participate on the weekly dev meetings. There is information for this on the link below. We use Zoom. Everyone is invited. We have meeting notes in there. You can take a chance to present something that you want to showcase, or maybe you have a development question for your extension that you really don't know what is the best approach to solve. The core development team goes to these meetings. They're happy to see new members, see new users, see new developers. And if you would like to start contributing to the project, this is a good place to start doing it. Some of the people that joined the core dev meeting are now participating in the accessibility working group. So you can pick any topic that interests you and help us grow. Finally, there is the community calls, which is something that happens like every couple of weeks, every month. Think of this as a mini JupyterCon. It's a place to announce things. It's a place to demo things. It's a place where we're not really talking about this issue needs to be fixed and what's the problem. It's not a dev meeting. It's just public oriented. Anyone that wants to say anything about any topic JupyterLab related is welcome, or Jupyter related, not only JupyterLab related. The next calls that are on the schedule are going to happen February 23rd. That's next week, I believe. It's in the morning of Pacific time, US, so I think it's European friendly, so you're welcome to participate. You can also access the notes and type your name in there and say, hey, I am Francois. I want to talk about why CRDT is not a good model or something like that. I don't know. That's also welcome. And yeah, I think that's most of what I have for you today. It's roughly, are we on time? Under time? Over time?
Yeah, it's almost 8:30 now. So thanks a lot, Gonzalo, for this huge presentation and all this overview, and also how it works on open source. It's true that probably we do not have much presentation saying that, yeah, well, there are tools, open source tools, and how it works probably in such depths. So thanks a lot again for this. And so if you have any questions, so please ask either in French or in English. We probably can translate French to English if it's not, if Gonzalo can't understand.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was really, really cool. I had a question about the extension ecosystem. Do you develop or work on Jupytext?
Jupytext, do I work on that? No. But I know it exists, and I know some of the people that work on that.
Are there any plan to integrate something like a serialization, synchronization mechanism deeper into the core of Jupyter?
I think so. I haven't talked with Mark in a while yet. So I'm not really aware of the state of this project, but the extension is there and works, and Jupytext allows you to work. If you have worked with R and maybe R Markdown, I guess Jupytext is kind of like that in reverse. Like you would type something that looks like Markdown in a text file, and it would be rendered as a notebook where every part is a cell. The notebook took the different approach where it explicitly puts cells in the document, and it's a JSON file with nested things where there is an array of cells and all that. So Jupytext is kind of like R Markdown in reverse. You want to work in your notebook, but at the end of the day, you want it saved in a format that is just text and not JSON, and it's readable, and it helps with version control. So this extension will allow you to do that. When you install it, I think you will get the option to synchronize. Every time you're working on a document, it will automatically save that same document in any of these formats. So you can use % format, live format, Jupytext Markdown format, MIST. I would favor this one, but yeah. And you can also use R Markdown format. So as far as I know, the project is maintained. There is even here a JupyterCon video. So I guess the question would be, do you think that is currently not being maintained, or there are things missing, or you want it to move faster?
No. I use it like every day. I'm very happy with it. But I was just asking if some solutions that may become the core experience of Jupyter will be more embedded into the ecosystem, or it should just stay in extension format. But I think with 3.0, it's easier to install extensions, so maybe it will democratize a little bit more because it's easier to install.
That much on the actually, you have an extension manager on Jupyter that you can use to install extensions and all that, but that is still not working perfectly with the new type of extensions, so that's why I didn't demo that, because it would be a very bad demo. But the plan is to make this much easier so that you can actually search for your extensions right there in JupyterLab and just do a one-click install, refresh, and there you go. And that would really allow a lot of extensions like this one, which is pretty cool. I don't use it that much because the problem is when you're helping develop a tool, you stop using the tool for your actual work. So that's a bummer. I mean, I was using these things before, like a couple of years before, but now that I'm working to improve them, I don't use them that much. So that's why my demos are so crappy on the side. But I don't think that Jupytext is on route to become part of the core, as far as I know. But it's something that you can suggest. I mean, at some point you can open an issue in JupyterLab and say, hey, have you considered making this part of core? That's a valid question, and maybe people will tell you their opinions or not on whether it makes sense. There is a larger discussion in terms of what's the future of the notebook format.
Yeah.
And that's a larger discussion that is very much related with this extension, and is that maybe JSON was a good idea at that point, but maybe right now we need something different. Maybe we want to separate files into outputs and inputs, and we don't want to have all this gibberish in JSON. Maybe we want something that looks like R Markdown. And Jupyter when you open it, it should be able to do the right thing and know how to deal with it. That is something that is in discussion. Not much progress is being made in that front, unfortunately, but probably something that would interest you a lot if you wanted to participate in that conversation. So you have to go to the dev meetings.
Yes, there is no choice for you. There's another question asked by Guillaume about this Jupyter notebook. Classic Jupyter deprecation.
Where? Oh,
It's
sorry, I wasn't in the last one. Guillaume. When? Ooh, I don't know. I really don't know, but I would say that on 2022, the notebook should be already be deprecated. That's my gut feeling. So maybe this year it's fine, but next year I would move, maybe.
But as you said, so it will be still, covered, supported for these security probably issues, but probably stop development, right?
Well, actually, we also need help from other vendors. Like a lot of people expose themselves to notebooks for the first time by installing Anaconda, the Anaconda distribution, and there by default you have the notebook, the old one. So this is actually one of the conversations that we need to have with Anaconda. Is like maybe they should start bundling JupyterLab and make that the default, so that people that actually download things are exposed to this right away. The other things is how can we make lab more gradually complex, so that you start with something that is simple, and as you start using it more, maybe you will start using more of the complexity that it warrants and provides. This is something related to the user experience. We're also considering some of this, but we don't have a solution for that or a roadmap. We have another one there, Mary Jane Little. That's a good one. Can I take a screenshot of your message and post it somewhere?
I think she just left there, but yeah, probably.
Okay, sorry. This is a public meeting, so. Okay. Mike and Michelle, do we see collab? Yes, competition. It's a tricky subject because collab has a very deep-rooted interest in TensorFlow, and I think that a lot of the collab work was related to having more people use TensorFlow. I may be wrong, but that's what I have in my mind. Google could have improved the Jupyter and helped the community, but then they just took the things they needed and created a product, which is kind of weird. It's convenient for some people. I prefer people to use Binder. With the RTC work improving, we will get there eventually. With VS Code, it's different because JupyterLab is kind of like, sure, you can use questions using the microphone. So the thing with VS Code is that VS Code is first an integrated development editor, or like a very slim IDE that is trying to provide notebook experiences. So it's kind of like, it's a code editor that wants to be like a notebook development environment, but the roots is development. Whereas JupyterLab is from the beginning a notebook development environment that is providing some tooling for developers. So you can see them, we approach from different sides to the kind of the same problem. You're a developer and maybe you want to do more data science things, you can use VS Code, but you're a data scientist that wants to move more into developer, you will probably need to move to VS Code because JupyterLab is still not on par in terms of development experience. And one of the questions always is, how far should we go in terms of providing development tools? So basically, it's difficult to compete with Microsoft because they have a lot of money and a lot of developers in terms of being up to date with this tooling. However, we do serve a specific niche, and it's the notebook development environment or the notebook development experience. And in that front, we're JupyterLab and Jupyter is still providing a very good experience, but everyone is providing notebooks nowadays. Like MATLAB has notebooks, but I don't want to use them. Not anymore. I already did that. So yeah, that's kind of like my opinion. Take them with a grain of salt. That doesn't represent the opinion of the steering committee of anything. But it's a difficult situation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, so thanks for the presentation first. It was interesting to see what will evolve for JupyterLab. So yes, first my question concerning notebook was interested in the sense that I start to use notebooks or JupyterLab in single documents at university for some teaching and so on. And you can imagine sometimes it can take a long time to convince the IT of the university to switch from one system to another one. But in a sense, if you told me, Jupyter books will be deprecated quite soon, I would have had a strong argument to say to the IT, oh, look, we have to change that.
You are not doing your job right.
I tried, but it's no. But from that, Anaconda.
No. I mean, like you can tell the IT department that they are not doing their job right because.
We continue. No, as a side remark on that, I know that actually it's quite an old version of Jupyter notebooks and labs in the university, and we have some strange issue and behavior, even if it was installed with Anaconda purely.
Okay.
For example, Matplotlib plot didn't show, or sometimes on some computers, if they put the Matplotlib inline, they will have graphs. Some other students, if they put inline, they will not have them. They have to. It's quite. I'm sure it's not random, but it appears as. But another question concerning the evolution of JupyterLab. Is there any plan, not for the version 3, but maybe more for version 4, to have something like to allow a more easily asynchronous sales in a sense? As example, sometimes rendering plots on Matplotlib can be quite slow and long, and you have to wait a lot of time that your cell is computed and without being able to do anything else.
Yes. So regarding that, there is nothing well structured in the plans, but work has started to bring the notebook model into the server. Because right now what happens is when you open a notebook on JupyterLab, on the JavaScript side of things, you will have like a model of the notebook loaded in memory that tells you have 10 cells, this is the output, this is the input of these ones. And the thing is that maybe you're running a long-running computation, and for some reason your browser crashed, and when you restart, you lost like the state. So the work that would allow to remove that problem and also help in the things that you are suggesting is that the model would be moved to the server so that the state of the notebook lives in the server. So if your browser crashes and you reopen, well, you have everything in there. And this will also help with what you're mentioning. Like you could start a calculation and send it to the back and have that model update when it finishes, but in the meantime, you could still be working on other things. So it's a big paradigm shift in terms of how it works. There is something planned kind of in there. I don't know if it will make it to 4, fingers crossed, but the way to make these things move forward in any direction is to go to the issue tracker, look for an issue that talks about it and make some noise, or visit the chats or visit the dev meetings and ask this same question. Because I have a very biased, segmented, fragmented view of these things from the things I've talked with people and the people I work with. But there are core developers that have their share of many years working with this and have maybe a clearer picture. So my suggestion is always just go to the meetings and ask questions and make your voice heard. Let's
Thanks.
let's
So you
exercise
mean,
that democracy.
yeah, so you mean that if I develop a Jupyter extension asking the question every week, it might help?
It might, or we might block you. Say, hey, this guy's
I will
Guillaume
use-
just got online, blocked.
Thanks, Enrique, and thanks again for the presentation.
Thanks for the questions. I appreciate. Okay, Charlotte. Hola, Ariel.
There's another thing too for the overview.
Sorry? Okay.
I would just
Yeah.
mention that there is another thanks for the overview of the presentation. I mean, of the JupyterLab.
So yeah, I hope this was useful. I was a bit afraid I was going to be under time, but there's yeah, live demos always make fun of this.
Yeah, it's true. I was wondering actually, there was also sort of talking about extensions with video integrated into the JupyterLab or something, or I probably understood that.
Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's talk about that. Let me share my screen again, maybe.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, can you hear me? Can you see my screen?
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, so I think that this is what Victor referred to, that it's we can make a whole presentation just about cool extensions out there. This is one of them. It's called Jupyter Video Chat. So basically it allows you to embed a Jitsi kind of client within one of the panels of JupyterLab, and this is actually very useful. And inside QuantSight, we were at some point considering, I think we still haven't implemented, but we wanted to use this for doing our our trainings, so that people can watch the video, see the person, but at the same time maybe work on the left on a notebook. And when real-time collaboration is there, well, they can follow what the teacher is doing right directly in a shared notebook. So this is part of the work going into making collaborative work more pleasant and more streamlined within JupyterLab.
Okay.
Now that we talk about cool extensions, this is another cool extension that I wanted to show. I don't know if you have used something called Draw.io. Pretty sure some of you might have heard of it. It allows you to create diagrams and flow charts and all that. So there's an extension that allows you to do that right away, right directly from within Lab. So you can create a new diagram, and you can do a bunch of stuff in there, which it's very useful when you need to actually do this type of work with connectors and flow blocks and all that. You can save your thing and get an error, because why not? And then it should be somewhere in there, and you can open it, and there you have your super sweet flow diagram. So this is a very cool extension. I used it for creating some documentation a while ago, and it's very nice. So I encourage you to try it. I'll post some of the links of this on the chat. So
Well, anyway, I think the link for the presentation will be posted on the meetup, on the Slack, and.
Oh, I never pasted it.
No, I mean, we will post it after the presentation, so everyone who participated or can participate then can find out these documents.
Okay.
So anyway, if we have not much questions, so it's almost 9 o'clock at Toulouse time, so probably we can wrap up here. And so if any other burning questions, so please take this advantage to ask it there now, or probably you can reach out probably to Toulouse Data Science team by Slack, and probably we can ask Gonzalo by the other means of communication he provided.
Yeah, feel free to ping me on networks or any stuff you want. Is this being recorded? No, not really.
Yeah, we are recording it. I think I will get back to you if it's okay for us to publish it.
Yeah, no, it's okay now. Someone was asking about if there was a video of it, but I don't know if it was being recorded. So
yeah, it's being recorded. Hopefully, it will work. We will see.
Yeah, it happens. If not, then it's sí, Ariel. Más tarde te escribo. So yeah, you see some Spanish speakers there. I shared the link in some of our chats. So yeah, that might explain that.
Okay, that's why.
Okay. I didn't know the Spanish community is that large into data science.
So it's probably the first time we have such an international meetup for the Toulouse data science meetup. Well, anyway, thanks a lot, Gonzalo, again for your for presenting things, and it was really interesting to see this. And hopefully everyone could learn more things now to using this JupyterLab 0.3 and update their 2-point-something version, like I have also.
That's a plan.
That's a plan.
Yeah, now you can do the PyTorch Ignite presentation here in the Colombia meetup.
Yeah, we can talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I need to improve my French, my technical speaking French, but I'll do my best. Well, I'll keep coming to these meetings. That will help.
Probably Journal Club about some other things about this. I mean, the extensions, all the things could do things and even do it in French also. So anyway, thanks everyone for participating, and so see you on Slack, on Meetup platform as well.
Absolutely. So
yeah,
thanks
see you.
everyone.
See you. Thank you, Gonzalo.
Oh. Avec plaisir, mes amis.
Très bien. Bon, merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup à tous.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup à tous.
Salut.
Salut.
Bye bye.